Going through this process on the way to the federal bench is no walk in the park. As these nominees can tell you, the questionnaire that they start submitting to the committee, to the White House initially, and to the committee, is detailed, asking all sorts of questions about their lives, professional, personal, and otherwise. It takes some time to complete that. Once they've completed it and handed it over to the White House, the investigation really begins in earnest, with the Federal Bureau of Investigation and all of the federal agencies looking carefully to see if the remarks or the statements are accurate and whether there's anything that's been left out of importance. If you pass that hurdle, you come to this committee. Our staffs pride themselves on both sides, Republican and Democrat, of being professional and going through the same information again to find out whether or not there's anything objectionable about your nomination. In the meantime, the American Bar Association is at work as well. They reach out into the communities that you've lived in, practiced law in, grew up in, New Jersey, wherever it might be, to find out if there's anything about you that hasn't been disclosed that should be relevant or important. Now, I say this so that each of us sitting in the audience can understand, do you have something in your background that might be brought up that could be controversial? The FBI does its best to make sure that they have dispatched their responsibility. Then ultimately it comes to the senators on this committee. The American Bar Association interrogation of your fellow colleagues in the law and personal is about as finely grained as anything can be. And I want to make something very clear. I'm proud to announce that these three nominees were all found unanimously well qualified. Unanimously well qualified. There have been nominees before this committee in previous administrations that didn't meet that test. You not only meet it, but you exceed the expectations. So the one thing I would counsel a high school student who says someday I'd like to be a federal judge is, it's a great idea. So one piece of advice, don't put anything in writing from this moment forward. And I'm serious. We have had, honest to God, we have had nominees before this committee who, because they wrote a piece of poetry in college, some members of the committee have been convinced that was a clear indication they had committed their lives to Karl Marx. I can't believe it, but it's happened over and over again. So if you've put anything in writing, expect to be reminded of it today. Which brings me to Judge Weiss. You put everything in writing. You are a prolific author. You are an active person when it comes to your political responsibilities and supporting candidates. You've been involved in years of issuing opinions. You've been elected and re-elected. You have a body of work when it comes to expressing yourself on so many issues. But the obvious question from your critics is, we know who she is and what she'll do on the bench. Totally predictable. So how would you answer that at the outset in terms of your role as a judge and your role as a citizen and publicist?
Thank you and good morning.
Good morning.
What I hope to bring to the federal bench is really what I have been doing for the last 10 years on the state bench, which is to follow the law in every instance, irrespective of whether it comports with my personal views, to ensure that people get a full and a fair hearing, to explain what I'm doing, which is particularly important when you're dealing with people who are self-represented, to recognize that justice isn't just an outcome. That I think people, even if they have the outcome that they hope for in a case, if the entire process does not feel fair and transparent and equal, that justice has not been done.
And so your obvious responsibility on a district court is to follow precedent. And what if that precedent violates some of your basic core beliefs politically?
I have issued more than 10,000 decisions in the time that I have been on the bench. And I will tell you that there are many, many of them that do not comport with my personal beliefs. And that is the way that it is, because that is the way that it has to be.
Ms. Provenzino, you face the same thing as a district court judge. What is your response?
Thank you, Senator. I've been a prosecutor for 14 years. Prior to that, I was a civil litigator. Any personal beliefs that I have are completely irrelevant to how I would approach the bench. I would do exactly what I'm doing as a prosecutor now, fairly applying the law to the facts, and I'd follow any binding precedent from the U.S. Supreme Court and the Eighth Circuit.
Ms. Costello, first let me give special thanks and congratulations. Was it your father or grandfather who was the tail gunner?
My father.
What an amazing man he must have been. That was an act of courage every time they went into those airplanes, and he should be remembered for that, and I'm sure for many other things. Same question to you.
Senator, yeah, my personal opinions would play no role in any decisions that I would make as a judge. I've served in the Air Force, I've served as a federal prosecutor, and there have been instances where you have to follow orders or you have to follow the policy, and you do that regardless of your personal views or opinions, because otherwise the system doesn't work. I'm duty-bound to follow precedent.
Thank you very much.